Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like I should reintroduce myself. I feel like I've gained quite a few more subscribers since the last time I did a proper introduction. So for those who are new, hello. My name is Oge. I'm a PhD student studying astrophysics at the University of Washington, and I'm sharing my journey here with all of you guys on YouTube. I'm here to help demystify anything about what it's like to be an astrophysicist. I'm here to share some tips with you all, whether you're an undergrad or in your graduate program, or if you don't fall into either of those categories of pursuing a degree in astrophysics and you're just here just to watch me talk nonsense on the internet, hey. So as you can tell from the title of today's video, I'm going to be providing you with a couple study tips of mine. Studying physics in undergrad was very difficult for me. It took a while for me to get into the rhythm of finding what study habits worked best for me. So I'm here to share some of those with you all. Huge disclaimer. I am not saying that if you are to follow any of these study tips, you are for sure to do better in your classes or to get better grades. That is not what I'm saying at all. These are just what helped me when I was an undergrad. Some of these I also didn't really do in undergrad, but some of them are like what I wish I would have done that maybe would have helped me do better. Everybody has different ways of learning and processing information, so I'm not saying that this is the one way that you need to study to perform better in your academics. So without any further ado, let's get into the study tips. So number one on this list, and if you've been watching quite a few of my videos, you can probably already guess what my first study tip is going to be, and that is to find a study group. Study with other people. Finding study buddies is going to make your life so much easier. This should come at no surprise, but physics is very, very hard. Studying physics, there's a lot of different skills that are required to do well in understanding the problems that you were given. Physics involves a lot of math. I'm sure you all probably know. Physics also involves a lot of reading comprehension skills. Some of the questions that you get are just totally out of this world. Step one of just reading a question and interpreting it can be very, very difficult. But when you're in a study group, you can play off of each other's strengths. Everyone approaches problems from different angles, and if you can use that to your advantage and the group's advantage, it's gonna make your life so much easier doing homework as well as exceeding in every single class that you take, even in exams as well. Science as a whole thrives off of collaboration. So when you begin to build a lot of these collaborative skills, it's going to be very, very useful for you in the end moving forward. I have said so much about the importance of building a study group. I'm sure many of you might be tired of hearing it by now. So if you don't have a study group, I really encourage you to try to find a group of friends who are very trustworthy and also very, very open and kind people that you can collaborate with. If you don't know where to begin in finding a study group, I think the easiest way is just to connect with people on a personal level. So I was able to connect with people that I shared similar identities to. So a lot of women presenting people. And from there, it just blossomed into a whole group. It was amazing. I've said this a million times before. I would not have been able to survive my undergraduate experience without them. They know this. So I won't blab too much about collaboration because I kind of want to make a separate video on ethical collaboration practices as a whole and finding good study groups. But we'll get into my second study tip. And this is another really important one. And it's one that I kind of fell out of touch with the further that I got along into my studies, and that is trying to understand the material conceptually. I think most of the time that you're in your physics classes, a lot of the time the professors can just throw really long and complex equations and relations onto a board. I think math professors, specifically when you're in calculus, also have a really bad habit of doing this. To them, they've seen this so many times and it's very repetitive to them that they kind of lose touch of the bigger picture here. I'll start with a really easy example of kinematics. It's simply how things move within a system. So if you have a car that is traveling from point A to point B, you're trying to calculate the distance it's traveled, at what acceleration or what velocity it's traveling at. And you're given a handful of these equations with different concepts and you're not really sure what it means and your professor is just writing things on a board. really taking the time out to understand what this equation is trying to tell you and how you can apply it to real world applications will do you huge favors. When I first started taking physics classes, I think my professor tried to do his best to explain things conceptually, but at one point he also kind of fell out of the habit. Also same for my second physics class, which was on like circuits and electricity. I'm like, okay, I'm like drawing pictures of nodes and I'm writing these equations for circuit capacitors and things like that. But I'm like, what does this mean fully? So I would literally go on like YouTube or like Google. I'm like, what is a circuit capacitor? How does it work? How can I apply this to like the real world? I'm like, okay, if I'm placing two batteries here and if I connect something here, then that is what this is doing. I'm like, okay, well, what if I decrease the power on this battery? Then what happens? Understanding things like that are going to help you so much more in the long run. Not only that, but professors will literally ask you questions like that on exams and in homeworks. And I really do think that it's easier for you to understand visually what's going on in some of your earlier physics classes, because when you get to things like quantum mechanics, it's so hard to conceptualize because you're talking about things that are like at the atomic level, right? I mean, sometimes you're like, all right, well, electrons jumping through orbital levels, like it kind of makes sense, but then you start talking about things like quantum tunneling and like, you know, like potential wells. It's kind of hard to visualize that kind of thing, but there are some really great resources online that will assist you with this. This is another tip that I kind of wish I did when I was an undergrad. I find myself doing it now more in grad school, but it is like, you know, when you're taking notes in class, write down what the professor is saying, even outside of the context of what they're writing on the board. I know that was a lot, but most of the time when your professor is teaching a class, they're just writing equations and relations and practice problems on the board. Yes, that is important, but also like what they say and how they compartmentalize and break down the problem is equally as important. For example, they might say, oh, you know, when your kinetic energy increases, this decreases. Like they're inversely proportional to one another. Or, you know, if they're describing like a system like as a whole, they're like, all right, well, when this radiates this kind of energy, then you end up with this. They don't always write that kind of thing on the board. They just expect you to kind of get it based on all of the math that you've done. But as someone who doesn't always understand relations simply by like math problems, and when they get really complex, it's always good to like take note of the little things that they say. Like I said, I didn't do this in undergrad because it's something that I didn't really catch on to all that much, but in grad school, I find myself doing it all of the time. And it is essential. It's really hard, I think, to be a good note taker and be able to pick out all of the really important things that your professor says. But once you get good at picking out the little pieces, then when you go back and like read your notes, you know what is important and you know what not to do when you're solving your practice problems. This gets me into another study tip. Also very embarrassing that I'm even saying this, but I feel like I can't be the only person that did this in undergrad. I also just found myself not reading my notes. And I don't really know why. I'm like, why am I taking these notes if I never refer back to them later? But the study tip is review your notes. And I probably never really reviewed my notes all that much because I wasn't taking good notes. Like I wasn't writing down the little things that my professors would say in class. So I opened my notebook and was super overwhelmed because I'm like, all these equations and shit, I don't want to fucking look at those. Like, I don't know what sigma means in this context. Like, I don't know what that is. But yeah, no, I do think it's really important. One thing I would recommend after like every single class, even if it's like the day after, maybe not the day of your class, go back, review what you went over in your notes, maybe jot down some questions of what didn't make sense. So that way, when you go to your next class, you could maybe ask your professor or you can ask your study group, hey, did anybody catch this during class, what this means? Because I didn't. You will learn so much more from that. I think it's good to recognize what you don't pick up on so you can fill in those gaps later on. Don't wait until the last minute to ask for help, essentially. Is that another study tip? Sure. You can feel free to laugh at me for like not reading my notes, but I don't know, babe. I hardly ever did. The only time I really would go through my notes if it was like the week of the exam and I need to do practice problems. So this brings me to my next study tip. You're probably asking, well, okay, if you didn't read your fucking notes, then how did you learn anything outside of class? Well, my friends, I would find resources online to learn from. I've said this plenty of times before. I don't know, physics professors, I didn't really learn a lot from them. To me, I am like a kinesthetic learner, visual learner. I need a lot of visuals. I need lots of repetition. And I need you to like almost spoon feed information to me. My professors were not giving that. You know, my professors were way up here and like your girl's brain power and like knowledge was way down here. And online, I just found that I was able to understand information when I was given it from professors at other universities that had their lectures online, or resources like Khan Academy, anything like that. That's how I did most of my learning, I think. And if you find that you are in the same boat, then I promise you there are plenty of wonderful resources online. If you're doing homework and you don't know how to approach a question, you could just type in that question into Google. A lot of the time, like Google will pull up like a course homepage from a faculty at some other university where they go through the entire problem like demonstrated, or it will be a lecture about that specific topic that the question is on. Sometimes you can even go on YouTube if you're really confused of like, you know, what is the electromagnetic spectrum, for example? Then you can go on YouTube and there will be small little lecture videos on what that is and how you can better understand it. Sometimes they'll have practice problems applicable after that you can go through for repetition. My next study tip is going to be practice, 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 practice. Okay, yes, you will have homework problems, but I guarantee you, even outside of your homework problems, you are going to need to do additional practice problems. The only way to really get good at approaching a physics problem is to do it multiple times. Or maybe like, I don't know, I'm just the only person, because like I said, I need repetition. And I was never good at approaching physics problems, especially when they're really long, like word problems. And you really only get better by doing it over and over and over again. There's no two ways about that. Practicing your practice problems over and over again is great. If you run out of practice questions, which I feel like is really hard to do because you have a whole textbook full of practice problems, and even online you have practice problems, most of the time, if professors are posting these practice problems, then they have the solutions available. You'll be totally fine. Another study tip that I've received in the past is reading the textbook ahead of time before the class. So if your professor posts the class schedule with specific weeks and what topics you're going to be reviewing in those weeks, you can read ahead. So that way, when you go into class, all the material that you're seeing isn't necessarily unfamiliar to you. And once you've read about it, then you can like ask the professor questions during class that you may not have understood during your first read around. And then after the professor has explained it to you, you can go back and reread your textbook again and make sure that everything makes sense. I personally was not a fan of this study tip. It never worked for me, but that's just because I'm more of a visual learner. I need pictures. Like I said, I'm very like smooth brained, okay? Like they say that the smarter you are, the more wrinkly your brain is. My brain is as smooth as a fucking chicken breast, okay, y'all? Like, I need pictures and visuals and like, I need things dumbed down so bad. I was not a fan of this one because the writing style of physics textbooks is so complex. Like, I don't know, it was never able to click for me up here, so I needed videos and pictures and colors. But if that works for you, then great, I'm throwing it out there for you. I've got two more study tips. The second to last one is one that I never did, but I feel like should be very helpful. Once you've had your exam grades given back to you and your professor has left corrections on them, go back and redo those practice problems. That's something I never did. And I was a dummy for that because during final exam week, the professors would just reuse the same problems from previous exams. And for some odd reason, my dumbass never went back to practice the questions that I got wrong on previous exams. So I'd get to the final exam and I'm like, damn, I didn't get this right during exam 2 in the semester, and I'm not gonna get it right during the final exam either. So I highly recommend actually going back and reviewing some of the practice problems that you got wrong during exams and homeworks. It will help you. You'd be surprised how lazy professors are. Like, they just recycle material over and over and over again. And I feel like they do this because they know students don't actually pick up on it until it's too late. Or unless you're like me and you go 4 years and still don't notice. My last study tip for you all is going to be attending office hours when you need it. I know that this one can be very scary, like going up to a professor and like asking like stupid questions. Again, there are no stupid questions. But I know how intimidating that can be. I looked at like my professors almost like gods or like Einsteins, right? Like they know everything. There's nothing they don't know. So are they going to look at me differently if I ask what an electron is? Maybe, but I really encourage you to do it. A lot of the time you'd be surprised. Some professors are actually really, really nice. And like at the end of the day, they want to help you. There are some professors that would be, you know, they'd be fine failing you. But I would like to believe that most professors want to see you pass the class and do well. So they're going to do what they can to help you pass. So if you're feeling brave and you really have tried like everything and you still aren't feeling super comfortable and you're not feeling like the most confident in your abilities, I would definitely recommend going to your professor and having them help you with practice problems, homework problems, or anything, any kind of advice that they could give you. It could be really beneficial. And with that, I'm going to bring this video to an end. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you learned a couple of new study tips. I hope these help you in your undergrad or graduate journey. Please, if I forgot any really essential study tips, which I'm sure I did because I've said this in the past, like I wasn't the best undergrad student, feel free to leave them down below. This is a community where we can all help each other. And like I said, everybody learns differently and processes information different. So I'm sure not all of these study tips are going to be applicable to you and the way that you learn. So if you have any that you live by, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. If any of these really resonated with you, then feel free to comment on that too. I am wishing all of you guys the best as this academic year is slowly coming to a close. I know I am very much looking forward to this year being over. Let's just say that this year's recap may have to have like 3 parts to it because y'all. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to give this video a like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.